Buffini is one of the great shapeshifters of 21st century British playwriting. She's written in a huge variety of styles, genres, and forms. She's written extravagant historical epics like Silence from 1999, an unsettlingly dark high comedy in Dinner. And she's written the wartime fable Gabriel in 1997, as well as a drama documentary about the relationship between Margaret Thatcher and the Queen of England, which was handbagged from 2010. Meanwhile, and quite differently, Dying for It in 2007 was a marvelously vulgar colloquial version of Nikolai Erdmann's satire of Stalinist Russia, usually translated as The Suicide, while Wonderland, powerfully rethought Alice's adventures in Wonderland in a contemporary urban landscape of teenage alienation and the dangerous seductions of social media. On TV and film, she's adapted Jane Eyre, Tamara Drew, and co-created Harlots, which has had 3 seasons so far, I think, and tells a gripping story of the lives of sex workers in 18th century London. She has a playful restlessness in the subjects that she addresses, the stories that she finds there, and the styles in which those stories are told. And because of this admirable diversity, she evades easy categorization. And it's perhaps for that reason that I sense she doesn't always get the critical attention that she deserves, actually. But a few things, I think, are fairly constant through the work. And I want to pick out a few of those here. First, she has a clear fascination with history, and that can be modern history, as in Handbagged, but Gabriel is set in Nazi-occupied Guernsey in 1943, I think. Wonderland, Blavatsky's Tower from 1998, and A Vampire Story from 2008, in different ways, merged the present with the 19th century. Silence premiered just before the end of the second millennium, but is set just before the end of the first. Welcome to Thebes from 2010 mashes up contemporary Africa with classical Greek drama and myth. Love Play from 2001, it comprises 10 scenes, all set on the same few square yards of land across 2,000 years. Second, she has a theatrical imagination that strongly resists confining her stories to domestic interiors and to individual psychology. Her plays always take place in a vast landscape. They could be the fields and courtyards and chapels of Silence, the plains and open spaces of Welcome to Thebes. But even when they are mostly set indoors, the landscape always seems to invade. You feel the presence of the island in Gabriel. The fog creeps into the house in Dinner. The floodwaters creep under the door of the manor. And of course, this is why there's a persistent thread of environmental concerns in her plays, which also include Greenland. Third, I think there's an interest in the metaphysical and the supernatural in her work, the things that go beyond the purely material and empirical. Ghosts flit through her plays. She allows the beyond onto her stages. There are intimations of the spiritual and the uncanny in pretty much all the plays, from Gabriel right the way to Manor. And this isn't merely fanciful, I think, in the work. I think theatrically it becomes a persistent affirmation of imagination, of love, of our connections between each other, that things are not as they seem and not all they could be. This supernaturalism, if you want to call it that, is not a rejection of politics or reason or humanity, because fourth, Buffini manages to thread a deeply humane commitment to love, justice, openness to each other in her plays, whether that's in the moments of tenderness and vulnerability that flower even in her bitterest and darkest play, Dinner, the unexpected discovery of love and desire against the odds in Gabriel, or Silence, or Love Play, or Manor. Right-wing politics are very precisely skewered in Dinner, in Manor, in Handbagged. Welcome to Thebes It takes on global politics, the plight of heavily indebted nations, the power of the global north and the resistance of the global south. And as I say, she's pursued environmental concerns in quite a lot of her plays, right the way through the last 2 decades. Fifth, Buffini is a remarkable stylist. She never quite verges into pastiche, but she has a wonderful ear for genre, period, register, and tone. The brocaded ornateness of Blavatsky's Tower is completely different from the fabulously bitchy interplay of Dinner, which in turn is nothing like the rich linguistic playfulness of Silence, which is a kind of medieval road movie for theatre with echoes of Monty Python and Hal Barker that braids together sex and spirituality, kings and cross-dressers. And sixth and finally, I think it's worth foregrounding her narrative drive. In an era where I think story has become a bit of a dirty word in theatre, as if Hollywood's rather narrow definitions of story has poisoned the whole well of how we tell each other tales, Moira Buffini's plays delight in the unfolding of a gripping story, the pleasure of reversals, twists, coincidences, secrets, and revelations that always make her plays, I think, thrilling to watch. Now, I mentioned Manna a couple of times. Manna's her latest play, and it's a victim of the pandemic close down. It was due to open at the Littleton Theatre at the National in April, but it's been postponed. I want to ask her a little bit about that, but also I want to ask her about her early play, Dinner, with which Manna seems to me to have some affinities. Moira's a wonderfully generous and accomplished writer, and I'm hugely looking forward to talking to her about her work. So, hi, Moira.
Hello.
How is lockdown at Casa Buffini?
It's actually, I think we're very lucky. We haven't been ill, touch wood.
Yeah.
My teenagers are home.
Okay.
It's kind of nice spending so much time with them.
Right.
The dog is very lucky at the moment. She's getting a lot of walks.
Right.
It's kind of okay. And also because I suppose compared to other people, I spend a lot of time in a room on my own working anyway.
Yeah.
When I'm not in production with something, I am in a room on my own, or a library. So I am the one person in the family whose life has probably been less disrupted. My partner's a teacher, so he's remote teaching.
Yeah.
And my kids have just had sort of school blown out of the water, but
of course,
everybody's fine. So lockdown for us is good,
Yeah.
It's all right. It's really weird, but fine.
I'm finding home is fine. I kind of hate going out at the moment because the empty streets are so unsettling.
Yes, it's kind of weird. There are things about it I love though, like the bird song. I cannot get over the bird song.
Right.
I just find myself listening to bird song the whole time. And just noticing the quiet, not being in a flight path, and it's the bird song really. I just can't get over it. So
And I guess, in a sense, I guess the biggest casualty for you, not to use an over dramatic term, but is your play Manna, which was supposed to open last week, I think.
It started previewing last week. And press night was to be tomorrow. So,
right. Okay. What had you actually started rehearsal then?
We had started. We got quite a long way into rehearsal.
Right.
And the final run through that we did on the last, when we knew it was going to be the last day, we just thought, okay, well, let's just run it through. And we said, look, let's not make this let's make it a party.
Yeah.
So we had a kind of party run through with a couple of bottles of fizz at the end.
Right.
And we sort of just left it, and everybody's kind of on a WhatsApp group now, waiting to hear when we can reconvene. And I think because I mean, I think it will be a long time. I don't think we can just jump straight back in when the theatre opens again,
No.
even though the set's half built. And, I think just because of it's such a big company and because of everybody's availability, it's going to be quite hard to get that group of people in the same room again.
Right.
So we're just waiting. It's a wait and see, But the theatre have been fantastic. The National Theatre are completely committed to the play, and it will go on. Right. I feel very well supported by them. The company is wonderful, so I can't wait to see them all again.
Yeah.
And it will happen.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I can't wait. I can't wait to see it. One of the things that I've said in my introduction, which I think is very striking about your work, is that you are a shapeshifter. That I think more than most playwrights I can think of, if I look at Dinner, or I look at Welcome to Thebes, or I look at Silence, or Handbagged, I would never guess in a million years they were written by the same person.
Oh, really?
Oh. I think that's possibly true. I just think they're very, very strikingly different styles. There may be some shared concerns in there, but it really does feel, it feels obviously from the outside like you write a kind of play and you go, I'm never going to write a play like that again, in a way, and do something very, very different. What's going on in your head when I say that? Do you recognize that or not?
They're all so me.
Right.
They're all from the same place, really.
Right.
But I just think when you find a story, each story does need telling in a really different way. They need different forms, and some stories you can't tell in the theatre at all. Some stories have to be something else, like Harlots was never going to be a play. That's got to be television, because it's such a long form, a kind of narrative. I wouldn't have known how to cut that down into a play. That was a story that had to be told over a long time. So it's always about what suits the story, and and more, even more so, like, what is the story? What do you want the story to do? Like, when you actually find the story, what are you trying to articulate with that story? So it's always something different, and I think you do find different, and also sometimes commissions are just different. It's like, how many actors can I have? 6. That already suggests quite a lot. How many actors can I have? How many actors do you want? That suggests something else, or right, for young people, we need something with a big cast and lots of great roles for girls. That suggests something else. So sometimes it's matters like that.
Right.
And I suppose with Manor, it was like wanting to write a play about Britain, picking something peculiarly British, and making a story in that peculiarly British space, which is the manor house, and also that has a dramatic tradition as well, the manor house, so you kind of think, well, what's that now? Who can we put in that manor house now? The manor house that isn't Agatha Christie, but kind of has all of that history in it.
Absolutely. And so it's interesting, you're using the word story. So is that for you the kind of the core? Because some people would kind of say, actually, it's a set of ideas about the world, or it's, I just had this character that I wanted to follow. Is it for you story where your plays start?
Yes, I think I'm a slave to narrative, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's what it is. I think that's who I am. I love writers who aren't like that. I revere and admire them, like Carol Churchill. But I am a storyteller. I think that's what I do. I hope I tell exciting stories with interesting characters that you want to spend time with. I think that is, and I don't think that's any lesser a way of putting your metaphysics in there and your political working out what the possibilities of a situation are in every kind of way, philosophically, politically, emotionally. I think you can do all that through story. I love exciting stories. That's what I love to write.
Oh, completely. And I'm not going to do a spoiler, but of course, Manor has things like what happens at the end of the first act, which is just one of those delights in the theatre of just going, of course that's going to happen, but why didn't I think it was going to happen? You know what I mean? Those sorts of moments that are just purely about the pleasure of sitting in the dark and being told a brilliant story.
I think there's something about the way that I write story as well, that I don't sit down and plan it at the beginning. I really don't. I really don't. When I start a play, I've got no idea what's going to happen next. And so it's the thing that makes me go, oh my God, that could happen.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Do you know what I mean? That you wouldn't think of if you sat down and planned it beforehand. You wouldn't think, oh yes, and of course he does that.
Right.
That only comes out of the moment. It comes out of, so much of it is, you've sort of got to know a kind of vague direction, but sometimes not even that.
Right.
So much of it is improvised, I think.
Right.
And it's also, like characters are what characters do, but how do you know what characters will do until you know who they are? How do you know who they are until they start doing things and talking to each other and to you? So it's a kind of, it all goes along together, really. You can't kind of separate out from action and go, this is my overarching story, this is what it's going to be. You have to get in there and find out. So who's at the door? I don't know. Let's see who comes in. Oh, okay, it's that person. What are they going to say? What state are they in? What are they going to say? Oh my God, she's in that kind of, so what's just happened to them? So it's that sort of thing, really. And the way that I wrote Manor, it's quite similar to the way in which I wrote Dinner as well, actually, given that we're going to be talking about Dinner in a bit. I wrote them both very quickly. Especially Manor, I actually had 3 weeks between, television series of things, and they sort of have you for the duration, like they're all consuming these big series. So I was writing Harlots, and between series of Harlots, I begged my employers for a few weeks in which to try and get a play down. So I had 3 weeks basically, and I went into the National Theatre Studio and I said, I've got 3 weeks, can you give me a room? I'm going to try and write a play and just see if it's possible to write a play in 3 weeks.
Right.
So all I took into that room with me, and it was a little empty kind of nun's cell at the top of the National Theatre Studio, with absolutely nothing in it, not even a view. And I just took in a bag of ingredients, really, which was a manor house. It was shortly after Brexit and the election of Trump, and all of that kind of swirling around. Didn't know how to articulate it, and I thought, well, I have to articulate how I feel in a play, because at least if nothing else, it will get it out of me and onto the paper. And definitions of fascism, Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment, Agatha Christie, ripping yarns, just a bunch of ingredients. And then you think, okay, who are the archetypes in a manor house play? You have to have the lady of the manor. You have to have a vicar.
Yeah.
And apart from that, and you sort of have to have a couple of young people. You sort of have
strangers,
generations, and there's usually a stranger or two knocking around. So I just thought, okay, I'll take that bag of ingredients in and see what comes out. And I think because I didn't have time to think, I just thought, okay, I have to go with this.
Right.
It was, I ended up with about a play about an hour and 15 minutes long. That's, some of the characters really landed and are still there. Other characters, I thought, no, that the gender of that character is completely wrong. Or there's two characters here we don't need at all. You know, things like that. So I changed quite a lot afterwards. But in that first 3 weeks, I got a kind of raw, three-dimensional thing that I knew had life. And it was really a great way to write a play. Highly recommended.
That's fantastic. And also, what's also fascinating to me about that is that in some ways, Manor is a bit like a farce.
Yeah.
It's a lot about people coming in, going out, and who's there and who overhears that person, and lots of simultaneous action in two different spaces, which, of course, I always think a farce is something that must be meticulously carpentered before you write. But you're saying, actually, there was a sort of improvisational energy that powered you through that first draft.
There was. And it's a crazy, wild, that kind of energy is crazy as well, which farces also need. And then, of course, all the meticulous working out happens when you redraft. You know, I mean, it's all done. But in the first instant, in that first creative burst where you find out what a thing is, I would not censor myself in that way, and I would not put the pressure on myself of having to know how the story ended. Because really, I mean, endings are very difficult. I think, and I think if you know the ending when you begin, you're really either you're really lucky, or it's not very interesting.
Okay, that's interesting.
Possibly.
That's it. That's very interesting when we come back to talk about dinner, actually, of course, because it's got a big ending. So. Is that, this sounds like something you're saying you haven't done that often. You said that Dinner was written quite quickly, Manor was written quite quickly, but that sounds like they're the exceptions.
Yeah, not always. Some plays take a lot longer, like Welcome to Thieves just took a lot longer.
Right.
Handbag was written very quickly as well, like really quickly. Right. And then other plays, you know, you sort of get halfway through and you think, oh, I don't know where the process sort of falls down, and you just think, I don't know how to do this. And put it down for a while and come back to it. And you know, Welcome to Thieves took longer because it was so much bigger.
Yeah.
It was just so much bigger, and I think I was learning how to do it. And I like that. I like taking on something that I don't know how to do. Like I loved writing Wonder.Land as well for the same reason, because I just didn't know how to do it. I'd never done it. Right. I don't know it. I'd never written a song. And you know, so taking on things that you don't know how to do is extremely wonderful. But they take a bit longer.
And you said that obviously story is a key driver for how a play develops for you. But you're saying, actually, in terms of where Manor started, it started with the idea of a manor house, and, as you say, the kind of Brexit, far right, that sort of stuff. So it's a kind of bunch of ingredients. Is that typical? Would you normally start with this sort of basket of, somehow all of these things are in my head at the moment, I think that's a play?
Yes. That and in fact, I think the only way that you can, it's a burning, I would describe it as a sort of burningness, and that the only way you can get it out of you is to try and articulate it somehow. And the best way I found of articulating it is in a play.
Right.
I started feeling so much less powerless about the political situation in the world when I started writing the play. It just made me feel so much better. It becomes a sort of solace. You know, even when you're writing about very dark things like Welcome to Thebes, I found an incredible solace writing that play.
Right.
Even though it's it's a sort of post-apocalyptic vision of a completely broken down nation, and the people who were trying to put that nation back together again. I found it incredibly wonderful to write. You know, and yet looking at global affairs, I do sometimes just feel terrible despair and powerlessness. I think we all do. That which writing alleviates for me.
Right. And does kind of research play a role in your playwriting?
Yes, in everything I write. Yes.
Oh,
it's
right. Okay. And
yes.
how do you approach that, and what does it actually give to your play?
It depends. Again, it depends what the subject matter is. I mean, sometimes it's just reading masses of history books and biographies, and
Right.
Handbagged would be an exercise in reading everything I could find and watching everything. You know, just watching endless YouTubes of Thatcher and the Queen. Just everything I could find, from the Queen at garden parties going here to you know, Thatcher's big bombastic parliamentary speeches, and her whole way of delivery, and her whole, just watching everything about them, and other things. I mean, like I say, you know, when it comes to a really contemporary play like Manor, what do you research really? This one, it was the I guess it was the far right.
Yeah. Right. And would you I mean, you've kind of said that these examples you've talked about are your sense the first draft is a discovery draft where you're forcing your way through a kind of a tunneling through to find a narrative. Have you ever written in a way that is more kind of planned and slower in the development of the story, or are you always someone who finds the story through
television has to be planned?
Of course, yeah. Right.
That's all meticulously storylined before it's written. And as films are most often adaptations, I mean, those are really different jobs, you know. But television, yeah, it's planned down to the last beat, and then it's written. You know, because usually more than one writer is writing an episode at the same time, and you're sort of overseeing the whole thing, and just trying to build this gigantic narrative. So that has to be planned.
Did you find that a difficult transition?
No, no, I'm so lucky, Dan. I've loved everything I've ever written. I just love it. I just absolutely, I loved doing telly. I loved writing harlots. I loved being at the centre of a room of other writers. I thought that was amazing. You know, just working with this fantastic team of people. Just from the first idea, you know, like making it up with my friend Alison Newman, who was the co-creator of it. We just started making these stories up and then it sort of grew into this gigantic beast, which is a television production, and then you sort of look around and there's like sort of several hundred people working on it over the years, and you just think, gosh, it's such a big provider of work, and a glorious, extravagant story. No, great fun. Loved doing telly. Would do it again in a while.
Right. Okay.
Needed a rest after 3 back-to-back seasons of Harlots. It does kind of take it out of you, but it is wonderful.
And you're not tempted to transfer that structuring it down to the last beat thing to a piece of theatre? I mean, do you think it's just that theatre writing is so different it would be inappropriate to write like that, or how do you account for taking pleasure in two different methods but never crossing?
I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, I think theatre. I can't imagine writing a play in that way. I think if it needed writing in that way, it probably wouldn't be, for me, it wouldn't be a play. I mean, sometimes it's quite simple because you sort of think, okay, dinner, that's quite simple because that you think, okay, well, it ends with the dessert.
Right.
You know, that's your structure. So that's really simple, but that plays about revelation of character.
Yeah.
You know, so that again is something that you write best in the moment, I think.
Yeah.
You know? And also, I just think you can allow. I mean, theatre. For me, it's very playful theatre.
Right. Yeah. What that makes me think, of course, is the other side of it. Is that, of course, I think your plays are very often, they have these very strong narratives, they have these very sharp turns and so on. But the other thing, of course, is that they're all stylistically really quite distinct. So, of course, the other thing that you're presumably discovering is the style, because the style of silence is really very unlike Handbagged, which is very unlike Welcome to Thebes. So is that also, do you have a notion of what it's going to feel like sort of verbally, structurally before you start, or?
Sometimes.
Right.
Sometimes. And there's things I sometimes want to explore.
Yeah.
Handbagged, I was simply just completely up against the wall. I had a week to write it started life as a half-hour play in the Women, Power and Politics evening, and I promised Indu Rubisingham that I'd do it, and I just completely ran out of time. It was a crazy year. I'd got 2 films being shot back to back, and I completely ran out of time. And I was in this room again in the National Theatre Studio with a pile of books about Thatcher, and I just thought, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? Oh, God, I don't know what to do. How am I going to? I had a bunch of actors coming in on Friday to read through a play that I hadn't started. So I just thought, oh shit, I've got to get, you know, and then me just being so, these 2 huge figures, Thatcher and the Queen, these like great sort of monsters in my head, thinking, okay, I have to put these women where I feel on an equal level with them. I'm not just going to be some kind of little obsequious, shitty playwright. I'm going to get them where they feel uncomfortable and where I feel in charge. I'm going to put them on a stage. Right. So that's, I think, really where that. And I just thought, okay, I'm going to make Thatcher walk on this stage, and she's just going to start talking to me. Right. And that's how I started. And then I thought, okay, well, obviously the Queen's going to come on and bring her a chair. And then I thought, okay, I need another Thatcher. I need another Thatcher because she's going to start telling and then the other Queen. So it all happens. It all. So that's how that suggested itself. You know, I'd done all the research, and it was all swimming around in my head, and just thinking, they have to be in a theatre. And then the whole thing began to work and became playful, and so on and so on. With Welcome to Thebes, what I actually wanted to explore was something much more elemental, I think, and a kind of language of kind of statesmanship that only isn't men. A sort of to explore a kind of, yeah, you know, the characters have names from Greek mythology, and it's really taking some of the kind of scale of those
Yes.
plays.
I wondered if you thought there was any of that still at work in Manor, because one thing I felt when I was reading Manor was that even though of course it is this manor house play and you're doing some of the genre stuff with that, but then on the other hand there is the kind of dead husband, blind woman, flood, this religious rite, the early on these quite big archetypal moments happen, you
Yes.
know, and it
Yeah.
felt like there's something bigger. And there's also this intimation sort of the supernatural that is never.
Well, you see, I mean, really, you can't go wrong if you know, look at, you know, here's a great playwright, Shakespeare, right?
Oh, yeah, I've heard.
The one thing I take from, well, I take many things from Shakespeare, but the one thing I really hang on to from Shakespeare and think that is it in all of his plays is that there is this idea of the individual, society, and the supernatural, the spirit, the metaphysics, God, ghosts, gods and monsters. They always used to be on the stage.
Right.
And I think then in the 20th century, at the end of the 19th century, when plays started happening in drawing rooms, we sort of lost them. They sort of just fell off the stage. But I love gods and monsters, and I think they should be there. And I think there's elements of them in all of my plays. Yeah. I think because we keep calling ourselves rational creatures, and we're not. Right. And I think it's that whole side of the non-rational in us that we love, that we're drawn to, and we love the mystery of our existence, if you like. I don't have any answers for it, but I love the exploration of it, I must say. You know.
That makes a lot of sense when I think of your work. It's actually even handbagged. There's a certain sense of who our contemporary monsters are in a certain way. You know, and there's something about the way that Thatcher, I guess, in our lives has this sort of titanic, almost supernatural kind of looming presence over how we've lived.
Yes. Yeah.
I worked so I've worked in radio quite a lot with Fenella Woolgar, and I have to say, after seeing Handbagged, I found it quite hard to talk to Fenella for a little while, because that was such an extraordinary embodiment.
Absolutely extraordinary performance. Yeah.
Can I ask you a couple of very banal questions about how you write?
Yeah.
Like, are you a computer person? Do you write by hand? Do you use a notebook?
I usually write on a computer, right. But I don't write plays on Final Draft or any kind of software. I don't use any kind of like playwriting software. I just write them onto very word processy thing.
And in the moment, but let's say the period between, I think I've got an idea for a play, and actually sitting down and going, I'm ready to start writing dialogue.
Yes.
Do you keep a notebook?
I do.
Right.
I do. There's usually a notebook that's got splurges of research in, and you know, thoughts.
And what kind of things might they look like, those thoughts?
Rants.
Right.
I don't know. It's hard to describe, really, isn't it? It's really hard to describe. And also, like, once I never really go back and reread them, so it's kind of hard to remember. The research is very useful. I remember writing bits down. There was one scene in Crime and Punishment that I thought was so amazing that I wrote bits of it down. And to me, it's the whole wellspring of far right thinking that was beginning to happen in the 19th century. Was the thinking that the sort of man and Superman thinking, the sort of I am better than these people, which is the whole really what it all boils down to, I think, with the right is people's belief that they are inherently better than other people. And the left's belief that is not the case, and that we are fundamentally all the same, equal. You know, it's as a kind of ideal of the left. I don't think it's a sort of working practice of the left, but I think it's certainly an ideal. And it was so wonderfully expressed in Crime and Punishment, and I just thought, okay, that I wrote it all down. I wrote down, there was a lot I wrote down about weather, about storms. I don't know, it's hard to remember really, because it's sort of fuel, it's just kind of fuel, but there usually is a splurge, yes, of stuff.
And would you say that the kind of, because I also, politics is always at work, I think, in your plays, and sometimes it's quite elliptical and sometimes it's quite direct, and but there's always something kind of going on there. Do you kind of know what the politics of the play are before you start, or is that also a process of discovery in some way?
I think to me, politics are felt things. So I would go in with how I feel.
Right.
I'm no theorist.
Right.
I'm no theorist, and I'm I would go in with how I feel, with my own outrage and my own burning, and my own fire, I suppose.
Because I suppose one thing that I was very struck by reading Manor is there's for me, it was a surprising moment where I don't want to spoil or anything, but one of the main characters finds themselves very drawn to someone who is in many ways a villain of the play. So you and I wonder whether that was a discovery for you, that moment of going, oh, maybe there is, for quite a lot of people, there is a sort of almost erotic attraction.
To explore why those kind of politics are so alluring.
Right.
What they offer, why are they so seductive? Why are those kind of politics so seductive to such a lot of people?
Right.
And it was really a desire to you know, and to explore. I think that's what plays can do, is explore things in a way that nothing else can.
Right.
It's the same with the Thatcher play, really. It was like, try and be fair to this woman. I go in with my own curdling, literally physical feelings about her, and try to be fair. Explain to my children why I felt so strongly about her at the time. You know, they were just going, well, she's dead. Why is everyone in Brixton having a party? And this woman with dementia has died.
Yeah,
that's sad. And I was going, well, actually, this is why. This is why she's so hated. And other people standing in the street weeping over her. This is trying to go, how did that woman, how was she those different things to so many different people, so adored and so reviled? Really an extraordinary, extreme human character.
Yeah. You've obviously been writing plays for close on 25 years, something like that. Getting there. It's getting there.
The ones that made it out of my drawer. Yeah.
So this is a weirdly blunt question. What have you learnt about playwriting in that time?
Oh.
What can you do now that you kind of go, I couldn't do that 20 years ago, but now I have these mad skills?
I think it is. I think it is the wrestle with structure, the lifelong wrestle with structure. That now I feel structure. I feel it like a kind of sculptor.
Right.
That it's not a linear thing. It's a three-dimensional thing. And I have really wrestled with structure. I found it so hard, and I hated it so much when I started. I really found it so hard to end a story.
Right.
That's what structure is. It's ending, and the ability to end a story. And it has been a lifelong wrestle, but I think I have those skills now that I can, even if it takes me a long time to work out really emotionally and philosophically what the play is, and therefore what the right ending is, I can then write the ending. It is. I mean, I love the fact that we're called playwrights, and that there is a craft to it. It's just like learning to use a palette of paint or something. I don't know, but it is. I think structure is the material that I really had to wrestle with and learn, and then my ongoing love affair with language, and rhythm, and all of that.
I'm really interested that you say, by the way you say that structure is about how you end a play. Does that mean that basically in your head, structure is about something that is a kind of linear arrow pointing towards a conclusion?
No, it's a globe.
Okay.
It's a globe upon which it's a sort of climbing frame, if you like, upon which you can hang many things, and it's about, if your structure is right, if you drop a pin into the middle of that hole, it will have a massive resonance. That's when you've really got your structure right. It's not linear. It's not an arrow shooting off into one direction.
Right.
It's a resonance. If your ending is resonant, then, and I haven't always achieved it. You know, sometimes it just eludes you. But that's what I'm always aiming for, I think.
Can we talk about Dinner? So this is your play from 2002. So actually, this is really early, and I hadn't realised it was that old a play. But
it's about the same age. My daughter was a very small baby when I wrote that play, and she's 19 now. And it went on, the first production, my son, it was all about having babies, that play. My son was 6 weeks old when it went into rehearsal.
Right.
So it's my children are the same age as that play, basically. And now they're kind of like grown up.
And that's so interesting, because of course the last 10 minutes of the play are so much about parenthood and childhood and so on. That's really interesting. You described it to me, in fact, in an email. In fact, you described Manna as the younger cousin of Dinner, and I can see connections, the sort of wealthy environment of it, the threatening weather, the lights failing, the supernatural, and of course these sub-Nietzschean right-wingers in the play. Is there a more direct connection in your head between them?
Yes, but it's hard to articulate. In a way, you know, like Manna was written after Brexit and Trump, isn't directly about either of them. Dinner was written after 9/11 and isn't directly about that at all, but just all of the stuff that kind of threw up in me is articulated in that play somehow.
And do you remember what your kind of basket of elements was that you started with when you wrote?
I did know I wanted to write a dinner party play. I did want to write about that world of people who were older than me, of chattering, powerful people. I'm now that age. Uh, uh, I wanted to, I just wanted to write about them, really.
And this went on initially in that temporary space, wasn't it? The loft.
The Loft, yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
the National Theatre, which I think was Trevor Nunn's last season or something. And he
Yes, it was the last play. We basically crossed over between Trevor Nunn and Nick.
oh, right, okay. And so was it a commission? Did you know anything about how it might go on?
It was a National Theatre Studio commission,
Yeah.
I think I recall. And I didn't really know.
Right.
It was that odd crossover of times. Trevor Nunn really liked the play.
Right.
I think Nick was less keen, so it was a gamble. I remember going in to see Jack Bradley being sort of 7 months pregnant, and him going, "Well, Trevor really wants to do your play. Really want to do your play in the Loft." And Nick isn't so sure, and I was going, "Oh my God, this means, you know, the worst case scenario. I'll be, you know, I'll be going into rehearsals with a 6-week-old baby," which was exactly, of course, what happened. And it was a sort of now or never. Do you want us to do the play or not? Really.
Right.
And so I went to see my mum and said, what should I do? And she just said, "Well, you've got to do it." I thought she'd say, "Oh no, you'll just have had a baby. Don't be mad." But she went, "No, you've got to do it."
Oh, right.
I did it. And I think the other way they're related as well is working with my sister, working with Fiona, who was directed Dinner in his directing manner. That they and I just knew for you know, she's the right director, absolutely the right director for both of those plays. Yeah, I think that, I mean, and in my mind, I think politically everything, yeah, they sort of, even though they're very, very different beasts, they sort of come from the same place in me.
And I mean, one of the things that is so wonderful about Dinner is the character Paige. Did Paige pre-exist the Page? If you see what I mean? Did you have a notion of this sort of extraordinary, witty, campy, nasty monster of a woman, or did she emerge in the writing?
She emerged.
Right.
I mean, again, it's archetypes. You see, your dinner party play, and there'd been quite a few of them around at the time. Plays where people talked, but there wasn't a lot of action, and you know, that I found very frustrating. So I don't know why I wanted to write one myself, but I really, really did. And there's just archetypes to that kind of play, that you have to have the drunken hostess and the successful writer and the stranger and the sex pot, and you know, then there's a scientist and an artist in the mix. So yeah, archetypes. It's like, and then how do you twist? How do you reshape, repurpose your archetypes?
And did she come quickly? So I think you said that this play was written quite quickly. Does that mean that did she come quite fully formed, or was it sort of that you started to get into her?
I started to get into her, and as I remember, and it's a long time ago, as I remember, I was about 4 or 5 days into just improvising, having fun with these characters, but knowing by the end of the play there was going to be blood on the carpet. I just didn't know whose. Knowing that was one of the things I'd set myself, is that this is going to end badly, you know, and then realizing what the waiter's role in the play was. I think about 3 days in, I realized that, and then I just thought,
That's great. And one of the things, of course, that Paige does is, I'm going to say this wrong, so let me say it and then correct it. She sort of turns it into a comedy. Dinner isn't a comedy
No.
entirely, but it does have a very propulsive comic energy, mostly coming from her just saying constantly very funny, appalling things to people. And I kind of, in my fairly limited experience of trying to write things that are funnier than just whimsically amusing bits in serious plays, that actually that starts to impose a real sort of momentum on you, where you actually have to kind of keep the humor, sort of the plate spinning of the humor. Do you remember sort of feeling that in the play, that actually you have to kind of keep the energy of a certain kind up, or what?
I think comedy can be a real pressure when you're trying to write a comedy.
Yes.
I think it really can. I wasn't. Things just come out of me funny.
Yeah.
I think even when I'm trying to be deadly serious, and dealing with really dark subject matter, I think comedy is a weapon. I think if you're just trying to be funny, you're in loads of trouble. I think you have to be using your comedy for what are you using your comedy for? What's it for? Comedy is dangerous. It's really, really dangerous, and it's a weapon, and it allows you, as well as a writer, to take people into a very, very dark place and to go there yourself and not feel so frightened. I think Dinner is an incredibly frightening play, and I had a sort of reaction to it after I'd written it. I sort of wrote it, and I was so frightened by it that for that first production in the Loft, I changed the ending. I kind of bottled. I think I had, a 6-week-old baby, and I couldn't cope with the blackness of what I'd written. And I changed the ending and made it much more farcical and much more, so I sort of, and then when it went into the West End the following year, it transferred into the West End. I thought, no, that it has to be, that is the correct ending, the first ending I wrote, and I reinstated it. But it's a very frightening play, I think.
So the published version in your plays too, for example, is
in plays 2.
That
is the correct ending. Yes.
Okay, right. Oh, that's very interesting. Did you notice? I mean, how did people react differently?
I don't remember.
No.
I think it's a much better ending. I think it's a better play, the ending that it's currently got.
Right.
And I think one of the things that was just an example of one of the things that didn't work about the production in the Loft was the ending, I think. It was just an example of not having been able to wrestle that structure,
Right. Because I reread this version this morning.
Which one is that?
This is,
is that that's the original production version?
I'm guessing it is. Let me have a look. Well, it mentions the transfer to the Wyndhams.
Yeah,
so
it came out twice. That would be the Wyndhams one. So that's
correct.
Yeah.
Version. Because obviously it goes very dark, but there's also the sort of the gothic and again slightly supernatural suggestion of the ending. Was that something that surprised you in the writing, or something you kind of thought, no, I know this is lurking in the back of this play and it'll just
it's totally intentionally lurking there.
Right. Okay, good.
And as soon as I knew who the waiter was, I just thought, it's like I've described the play in the past. It's like the medieval woodcut of death coming to the banquet.
Yeah, right.
That's what it is. Death is at the banquet.
Yeah.
And I think there we are at the turn of the millennium. Here we are in the age of excess, and death is at the banquet.
Right.
That's really what the play is. Dinner. Yeah. I think.
In terms of the sort of some of the kind of comic sides of the play. Of course, it is satirical. There's a lot of satire in the play. Most of the characters in the play are horrible in some way. I always think that I think there's something really interesting, which I think you do really well in this play, which is tread that very fine line between kind of making people kind of awful and mockable, but also not losing our interest in them, because you know that you can sometimes make a play full of people who are so awful you go, I don't care about any of these people. But that's not what seems to me to happen in Dinner. How have you done that, do you think?
I don't know. I think they're all in such pain,
Right.
with the exception possibly of Lars. I don't think Lars is in a lot of pain, but I think the others all are, and
Right.
they're all sort of so desperate. Like Wynne is so desperate, and Hal. I mean, poor Hal is in such agonies of despair. And I think it's that really that sort of, even though they are all kind of dreadful, that sort of keeps you, that you don't just write them off, because they're not, there's you know, they're not smug. Only Lars is smug.
Right. Yeah.
You know, like Hal is so unhappy.
Yeah.
I think that sort of gives him a kind of you feel for him, even though he is awful. And the same with Wynne. She's so shockingly dreadful. She'll sit there at a table and blatantly steal another woman's husband, and yet you just think, oh, her life is so hard.
Yeah.
You know, her life is really hard.
That's the thing I was really struck again reading it, is that there are these moments of vulnerability for all the characters, and for Paige as well. Actually, there are the moments where I think you describe her as she's crumbling or something, which I think is a really interesting moment where you get, and just that verbal direction says there is an effort to this extravagant, larger than life kind of cruelty that she has, that is hiding things that are terribly sad, and that you can actually understand and sympathize with.
Yeah. That you know, that the mask drops, and you realize actually the cruelty and everything, that how admirable it is, and how courageous it is, and how outrageous it is, and how there's a sort of magnificence to her destructiveness,
Right.
that in the end is redeeming, I think.
Right. And then this is a last question. This is a more general question. I mean, in one of the introductions, in fact, you said this right at the beginning, that for a lot of playwrights, lockdown, being forced inside, staring at a computer screen for weeks on end isn't often not much of a change. As you know, there are quite a lot of people, I think, around the country thinking maybe this is a chance to try and do something creative.
Yes.
What would your advice be about maintaining a kind of creative energy in lockdown?
Oh God. I honestly don't know. I found it. I found it a very creative time, oddly. And I've sort of tried not to be as well. Like I'm sort of also volunteering for stuff to get me out of being creative, to actually go and do something useful for a bloody change. I would just say, if you ever thought that you had a story in you, and you have the privilege of some time to write it down, Write it down in whatever form. You don't have to know the ending. You don't have to know. If there's a voice that comes into your head that's saying something to you, listen to it and write it down. That could be the germ of something. It could be, I would just say, if this period offers you anything, is do something out of the ordinary as well. Like I've never gardened in my life. I found myself gardening. My family and I have got a competition running. We're doing various, still life paintings. Like my teenage daughter, we did the Lady of Shalott yesterday, and my son was the Banksy guy throwing the bouquet of flowers. Just like rubbish, like this sort of, but really good fun and creative, and do something out of the ordinary. I mean, my daily life, my discipline is writing plays, and I'm trying to do things that I never get time to. So if you never get time to write creatively, then write creatively. I would, my only advice, and as to how you do that, improvise.
Yeah. And that's a perfect place to end. Thank you so much for your time, Moira. That was really interesting. Great. And hope to see you again once this is all over.
Yes, indeed.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.